Hello, hello, and welcome back. This is How to Connect with Humans, and this is our episode 3, which is called Forgotten.
We've forgotten.
Yeah,
we've forgotten.
Freedom is always available.
See, Dave, it's not just you.
This is my kind of call.
And as you may have already seen and guessed, and the people that are here know already, so we are in the lovely presence of Jenny Anderson and Dave Elleray, and they have been around, well, around the world, but especially around Nepal, just about after the earthquake, where the grounds were still shaking, and they just went there and they work with a lot of people with this understanding. I help a lot, and they also have been to South Africa and work with please correct me if I'm wrong afterwards, and work with refugees and work around some issues around racism. They have helped tons and tons of people. They have been around this understanding for a long time. They was the first person to bring this understanding to the prisons here in the UK, and they have many stories that we absolutely loved. We were very happy to be at the retreat just, what was it, week ago? Week and a half. Absolutely incredible, transformational. They are amazing people themselves. It doesn't come more true and authentic for my liking and fresh, right?
Yeah.
They have been really important for you as well.
Yeah. I was saying to Dave and Jen just before we started that what I love about Dave and Jen is that they have no filter. When they talk, they don't filter anything. It's literally, I'm going to talk about this, but, and it's there. And for me, I love that. I love the directness of it. So for me, thank you guys.
Oh, thank you, you too.
Thank you. So here they are.
Thank you. Definitely. Well, I think we love the title of today's call, and we thank you for asking us to be part of it, because I think it's always an important conversation, but it feels at the moment in the world it's a really important conversation to be having and to be sharing, because I know there's a lot of very scared people at the moment for all around the world. But I think I felt so grateful to be connected to this conversation, because we've also met so many people who have felt inspired and a call to action at this time, and how can I serve and what can I best do? And I think that's where you start to see the freedom that exists within our mind and the freedom that exists within us, despite what's going on. And I feel like my understanding of the principles and the nature of experience has changed through all of this. Like, I've found more freedom within that, because you start to see your own edges. And like you were saying, we have had the opportunity to work with many people around the world, and you see how invisible our beliefs are, and how we filter everything through that innocently. And I think that's what's so beautiful about this, is because you start to see, well, how am I seeing the world? Well, it's a reflection of my mind. And I think whenever we've worked in different communities, especially communities that are so different from our own, it's given us the opportunity to see our own ego. And I think I said it on the retreat, the learning that's happened in that space has been between all of us. It hasn't been us teaching something. It's been like this, a space created where we all learn from one another. And I feel like whatever group we've been with, what it always falls back into is just this feeling of love and connection. And you start connecting with people on that level where we are all the same. And I think that's the thing that you start to realize, like, we're presented with so many things that look different, and we have different cultures and backgrounds and issues, but as soon as you start having this conversation, it opens up to where is it that we're the same. Where is it where we don't have that difference? And then we can respect and embrace and learn about one another's differences. And I think that's the thing I've loved the most about traveling, is starting to see my own limitations and starting to learn and get a respect for how other people view the world. And you realize how innocent it is, that we're born into systems, and we're born into a world which is a belief. We're born into cultural ideas, and if we don't know to question them, we just blindly follow them. And I feel like this conversation is like an opportunity or an invitation to question your own mind. Is it true? And I think from that place, connection's possible with anybody, at any age, even cross languages. Like, that's the thing we've realized. Sometimes we don't really even understand one another in terms of language, but there's a common language with this understanding that you connect with. And it's like, just some of the people that have struck us the most are people we've just had this moment in the street and connected with and smiled. And I think it's that freedom of mind that, regardless of where we've been born, regardless of the conditioning we feel we've had, at any moment we can break through that, because it's that one thought thick thing. And I think that's the limitlessness of our mind. That's the freedom of our mind. But if we believe it's hard, or we believe it's ingrained, or we believe it's tough, then that's how it'll appear. And I think I've started to realize how many of my stories have looked like they're a bit more true than other things. And I think that's the thing with the travel. You're like, wow, no, that's one thought thick too. So I feel like the title and the humanness in your title is the respect for us being here and being human, and our differences and our frailties and our judgments and our prejudice, the things that are invisible to us. And you start to see the innocence in that as a human being. And I feel like that to me has been the biggest gift in all of this, is the respect and the coming together of the seemingly two worlds, the spiritual and the physical, and it coming together in a respect and a love for them in what they seem separate, but then in the bringing together of them, it's a complete picture. And I think that's, to me, one of the greatest gifts I've had from learning about this.
I remember when we started Freedom Thinking, we were trying to think of the name. Before it was Freedom Thinking, it was like, what we're going to call it. Now, I have to admit something. Freedom Thinking was partially born because lots of other domain names were taken. So, but freedomthinking.co.uk wasn't taken. Freedomthinking.com was some Australian company. Freedomthinking.co.uk wasn't taken. But I remember being in the title, I wanted in the title of this company, I wanted freedom, because that was what I realized within my journey of exploration into, you could say the principles, but I look at all kinds of things. But it was through a conversation that I listened to with Sydney Banks that I had a deep realization that absolutely changed my life. Wiped my ego that I carried around with me in that moment. It killed it. And the world all of a sudden became a different place, and I was free. And it was a freedom that I had never experienced in my life, that I could remember. Well, possibly as a child I might have done, but certainly not in my formative years. If that's the right word. Latter years. And so I really wanted the word freedom in it, because to me, that's the essence of life. Total freedom. Now, I think what Sid brought to this conversation was something so simple, and he helped us understand why it appears that we are not free. I just want to add couple of little things into this. I mean, I have personally in my lifetime spent time in prison talking to prison inmates, but I've also been a prison inmate. I've spent time inside in a couple of prisons, and I've had a chance to reflect upon that personally and my time that I spent in there. And you know, I always viewed it as being a terrible thing that actually happened to me in my lifetime, but when I look back now, I view it with very different, grateful eyes. And I look back and I can remember times when there were moments and glimpses within myself and within others of connection and love. I just want to tell a quick story because this was something that only came to me a few months ago. I'd forgotten all about it, and for some reason it came back into my awareness again. And it was my very first night. My very first night in prison. I spent in Durham, which is our local Category A holding prison that you get sent to, and I was terrified. I never expected to end up in prison in my lifetime, but there you go. Life is completely unpredictable. And I remember this when I went into my cell. I was quite a big lad back then. I was doing a lot of weights and doing everything I could to keep muscle bulk on, and I was quite a scary man. I was scarier to me probably than anybody else. I was terrified of myself. But I was quite a big lad, and I had a chip on my shoulder. And finding myself in prison with other big lads with chips on their shoulders, I didn't like it. And I remember I got taken to my cell. It was A14. Wing A, cell 14. And as the door opened, there was a man sat in there. And this man was a big lad, a little bit bigger than me, and I was a big lad. And he had, I don't know if anybody's seen Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, but the witch on Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, she has a grey eye, like a blind eye, which is just grey. This lad had one of those. It turned out he got it from being in a fight and being thrown through a glass window, and glass went into his eye. And this man was volatile. He was really, really volatile. I'm just going to unclip Rusty, bear with me. Rusty is very aware it's his tea time.
No.
You can come and sit on Stardust. I remember this man, my very first night in prison, the suicide alarms went off in the cell next to me, in the next cell on. And this man just yelled and yelled and yelled this kind of saying that he had something, suicide. And he just repeated it. He shouted it down the wing and he shouted it out the window. And he came across as mad. And I was terrified of him. I was terrified of this man. It turned out that night, the lad next to us had hung himself in the cell next to us. And so this was my introduction to prison. The next night, I went to bed that night and I didn't sleep a wink. I was scared. I didn't know. I was scared of this man. He was in for violence too. And I remember the first thing he said to me, he looked at me and went, "You look like you can handle yourself, man." He was a Geordie lad, like, "You look like you can handle yourself. What's your name?" I said, "It's Dave." He went, "Davy, man." And he used to call me Davy, man. And I remember the first thing he picked up on was that I looked like I could handle myself. First thoughts were fight. I could see it. His first thoughts were, if he gets into a fight. And I was terrified of him. That night I never slept a wink, but the next morning I kind of woke up out of a dozy kind of state to him shaking me. Davy, man, wake up, man, wake up, man, wake up, man. I pretended to be fast asleep. I daredn't wake up. I didn't want to wake up, and I just pretended to be fast asleep. Davy man, I'm going today. I'm going. Wake up, man, wake up. And I didn't. I kept my eyes shut, and I pretended that I was fast asleep. Next thing I know, the cell doors open. He gets handcuffed and taken out. Cell doors shut, locked, and I find myself alone in this tiny little room with a bunk bed. Not a double bed, a bunk bed. I nearly said a double bed then. It was definitely a bunk bed. Thankfully. And I tried my best to get some rest, and I think I must have got up probably around breakfast time, which I think was about 8 o'clock. And as I got up, I walked over, I just started walking around the cell. I was all on my own, and there was a piece of paper on the side where you kept your flasks of hot water so you could make a cup of tea. And written on this piece of paper was the words, Davy man, don't worry. This won't be as bad as you think. And it won't be long before you're back with the people who you love and the people who loved you. And I remember my heart sinking, and I wished to God that I had opened up my eyes and said, good luck with your life, mate. I hope you find peace. I hope you get some reconciliation. I hope you do well. I hope life changes for you. I wish I'd just go up and given him a hug, but I didn't. But I learned something. I learned something about people in that moment that I never really forgot, and that was that within everybody is the capacity for love and hate. I met some beautiful people in prison, but like me, they were confused about life, and they didn't understand it like me at that time. It's not to say I fully understand anything now. I see things very differently. The freedom within that space to go through all kinds of experience in that same prison cell, I went through absolute turmoil, and I remember sitting down with my next cellmate, somebody called Thornton, and we just laughed. And we told stories of what we were going to do when we got out and how life was going to be different. And optimism went through optimism and joy and happiness, and then back into grief and sorrow and sadness and loss. Sat in this same little confined room. Both of us went through all kinds of experiences, all kinds of realities within our time there. Now, I never caught on to this fact at that time. It was only on reflection, after listening to Sydney Banks and a lady called Sue Huginson, who introduced me. So thankfully, she introduced me to this, saved my life, that I could see that in that situation, there was a fundamental lesson. And it's only through starting to look into the nature of the principles, or looking into the nature of life. The principles are simply a metaphor. They're just a description. They're just words. But it's through inquiring in this direction of the unknowable, the uncomprehendable. I think so many, Jen and I, we do lots of coaching with people, and people come and present many, many problems, many different kind of symptoms. And one of the first questions, we mentioned this on the retreat, but one of the first questions I like to ask people is, what is life? What is life? It's a point that it's a thing that every single human being on earth is experiencing. Every single one of us on this call right now is experiencing something that we call life. We give the word life to it. We call it life. We go, yeah, I know what life is. It's this. What's this? We spend so much of our time tied up in what life's doing, we never stop to question what is it? What is life? Where did it all come from? What invented humanity? What dreamt up human beings into existence? What thought that was a good idea? What put us together with such beautiful complexity that the more we study the physical organism, the more we find it's a divine mystery. The more we look at the brain, the more we find we know nothing. What is life? Because that to me is now the part that I'm interested in. It's this inquiry, not so much into how am I feeling or what am I thinking. What is life showing up for me? The inquiry is more interested in what's creating. In the past, my interest was always, how am I doing? Why am I doing this? Why would they do that? Why would this happen? Why the hell's that happening? I would be looking at creation and questioning that. But now, very much more so, my inquiry is more of a curiosity into the nature of life itself. And I find the more that I inquire into that, the more I find the freedom that ultimately I believe everybody is searching for. It's a beautiful thing which shows itself up in a unique way for each and every person. But fundamentally, it is all created in exactly the same way. And I think as we start to inquire in this direction, life becomes naturally, it just becomes more fulfilling. It becomes more heartfelt. It becomes more connected. We find more love. We find more happiness. We find more joy. We find the simpler things in life fulfilling. We don't need big extravagant things as much, and we find simple things in life fulfilling. And we ultimately become less of a burden on the environment and the planet because we don't need as much to thrive in life. And I just wanted to kind of just talk a little bit about a talk that Jenny and I were listening to earlier on this week. And I really feel that as people start to get a sense of this point, they will start to recognize it. It will start to make sense of stuff. And this was a talk, we just recently did a retreat online, and a dear friend of mine has just come out of rehab for alcohol. He was given a month to live, but told he couldn't stop drinking. So we got him into rehab. Beautiful man. He had the worst alcohol detox that they'd ever seen. And he survived. And he came out about 6 weeks ago into lockdown. He's living in a camper van on a field in the middle of nowhere, all by himself, released from this space into a field like a cow, almost into his mum's camper van. And God bless him, he was lost. And he spoke about how, Dave, this is really difficult. He normally wouldn't open up to me, but he opened up to Jenny and I, and he was just like, we were metal detecting up there, and just, that's how cool we are. I am. You just come along. You come along just to look cool, like a hanger on. Hoping some of my cool would rub off. But he opened up to us and he said, this is difficult. For the last 10 years, I've been told, 10 months, I've been told I'm broken and damaged, and it's going to take an awful lot of work for me to get to where I need to be. But ultimately, I'm never going to find that space of entirety and wholeness again. And we just stopped for a moment and said, do you believe that? And there was part of him that didn't. He said, but I've been told, you know, and these people are experts. I said, yeah, experts in what they know. And he was talking about how it's going to take a lot of time to change these neurological pathways, and continuously repeating the same thing over and over again to create a new neurological pathway. And I just stopped him and said, mate, that makes no sense to me. I said, first and foremost, why would they teach you about the brain? What are you going to do with information about the brain? What are you going to do with that? I said, and secondly, I said, that's not true. I said, I walk those neurological pathways of mine, if this is how it is true that it works, were so well walked in aggression and violence and bad temper and anger and depression. I said, but I didn't have to work on myself for that to neutralize itself. I said, you knew me before. And he was like, yeah, I did. I knew you before. I said, and you knew me afterwards? And he went, yeah. I said, I didn't do anything to change all that. I said, it took care of itself. I said, one insight will change all of that. It will take care of it. It will change your chemistry. It will change everything. One insight beyond our intellect and ego, one insight beyond what we think is possible. And so when we were talking about that, this lady said, oh, I'm interested in the brain. And I came across a talk about, does consciousness need a brain, with a scientist called Dr. Bruce Grayson a few years ago now. And I sent it to my friend, but I clicked on it again. I was like, I'll listen to that again. Because I remember he talked about past lives, that he'd studied within children who talked about past lives. And he spoke about near-death experience and how people were clinically dead, but then came back into their bodies and their bodies healed very, very quickly against all the odds of what people believe a materialist science believes is possible. And during this talk, we were listening, and he said something that I feel is so on point, so not the way the Western world thinks, but in my experience, so true. He said, one of the problems that we face in the Western world is the way we think. He said, the Western world adopted Aristotle's view of reality, Aristotle's view of things, of the way the world works. And it's a twofold system of things are either true or things are false. And we need to prove it either way. We need to either prove it's true or we need to prove it's false. He said, but in that lies a massive problem, because then we end up with this situation that we call mysteries. They're called mysteries, things we cannot explain, and they get put in the mystery box, effectively, for want of a better word. He didn't say that, but they get put in the mystery box, the placebo. These spiritual experiences that people experience, these stories that people come back with of meeting dead people within their dream that people didn't even know who, when they come back, they didn't even know they died. All these mysteries. He said, but not all cultures have that twofold way of viewing the world. So in Hinduism and Buddhism and in the East, they adopt a very different way of thinking. And he said, the way that they think about things is something can be true and something can be false. But something can also be true that is false. And something can be neither true nor false. They have a four-way of looking at things. So it can be true or it can be false. Or it can be both at the same time, both true and false. Or it can neither be true nor false. And that is the way that the Buddhist and Hindu culture look at things. Very more open rather than black and white. Is it true or is it false? So you could liken things like free will, this question of free will. It's like, is it true or is it false? Well, when we come to the Aristotle way of looking at it, we need to prove it's either true or false. But I know within my own experience, sometimes I really don't appear to have free will, but then sometimes I make a choice. It can be true and false at the same time. It just depends. When we try and locate this, when we try and put life, what is life, into a box of true or false, it doesn't fit. We get confused. It just throws up more questions. But when we fall back into that unknown and we realize what is life, well, life is ultimately, it is a divine spiritual manifestation. That's what everything is. That's what we are. We are a divine spiritual manifestation. Where do we find this? Within our being. We are that. It's like, it would explain, are we God or are we human? Well, we're both at the same time. We can be both at the same time. How can the inside and the outside be the same thing? Well, it's because it doesn't work on a linear kind of, we need to think bigger when we think about the principles, when we think about life, when we think about whatever it is, religion. We need to think bigger and open our minds more to the more abstract concept that life isn't what we think it is. It's bigger, it's more beautiful, it's everythingness. And I think when we start to open up our minds and let go, there is no freedom found in true or false. Trying to fit out true, false, right, wrong, good, bad. There's no freedom found there. There is just constriction of ego and belief. And as long as we adopt that way of thinking, it's like we will see good and we will see bad, and then we will judge and act according to that. But I think when I look back at the people that we met in those places in Nepal, and the Hindus and the Buddhists, they have a very different way about their being. It is far less judgmental. There is far less, it's true, false, right, wrong, good, bad. But there's far more openness, acceptance, far more love, I noticed. They require less from life. And there just seemed to be what appeared to be more peace within those people, in spite of having gone through the biggest earthquake in history, in living memory, should I say. And so I just wanted to put that out there, because I feel like we come from a very scientific way of looking at things. The Western world is very much based in science for the last 200 or 300 years. We've kind of almost ignored religion. Spirituality, religion. Science, hard sciences, fact, prove, disprove. It's almost a closed-mindedness. And I feel like we've almost been taught that within our culture. But now I feel like we're starting to reach a shift. I personally feel like the world is on a tipping point. It's on the tipping point of a shift in consciousness. More and more people are perhaps not getting involved in religion, but they're getting involved in the notion that reality, or we ourselves, are spiritual. Life is spiritual. They're starting to open their mind up to the spiritual, as the questions cannot be answered with the true or false. This mystery, people are getting more involved with the mystery and more curious about the mystery. And to me, that's where the freedom lies, is rather than looking at our problems, look at what's creating. For so much of the time we spend our time looking at all the problems in the world rather than what's creating. And I think once we start to inquire about what is the same, look for what is the same within everybody. And I think this is why Sid did such a good job. He spoke about, everybody comes from the same divine, serious, infinite intelligence that you cannot comprehend with the intellect. I call that mind. And he said, and everybody is this phenomenal awareness that cannot be explained or comprehended with the intellect. I call it consciousness. And then we have this gift that is infinitely creative, and it is the capacity through which we get to change the world within our own vision, within our own experience. And I call that thought. Again, something that cannot be understood with the intellect. This cannot be understood. The principles themselves cannot be understood. If anybody who thinks they know anything about thought, you can't know thought. What you think you know about thought is it's an idea, it's a concept, it's the collapsing of the power of thought into a single potential. It's a potential within an infinite potential. And it's likewise with consciousness. We cannot know this stuff with the intellect, but somehow deep down we know it's true. And it's in that somehow deep down knowing that it's true, we know we're safe. We know that fundamentally we are safe. We cannot be hurt. This is what people tend to wake up to, isn't it? We cannot be damaged. We can physically break our legs, but we cannot be damaged outside of a thought, a potential within the infinite. And so I feel like this was the gift that Sid brought. Sid brought a message of freedom to the world for people to wake up and realize, where is the confinement or the imprisonment of our experience truly created? It's within us. It's within our being. It's within our consciousness. The moment we change, our consciousness changes, the moment thought changes, new potentials, new realities are realized. And I feel like Sid brought a message of freedom and love to this world, because I know the only time I'm ever experiencing fear of any denomination, whether it be anger, whether it be jealousy, whether it be whatever it be, grief, judgment, is only ever when I'm believing that an external circumstance is having some form of hold over my consciousness, my being. And so the more we start to settle down and realize that there is no outside of our consciousness that we can possibly experience, the entirety of the world exists to us via this conscious state, experiencing and dreaming up the reality that we are encountering as our life. There is no outside of the dream. The more that we kind of see that, the more freedom we find to just live, experience all feelings, experience all thoughts, to be fully human. And I feel like that's what Sid brought. He brought the to my life. He brought the missing part, and it was me beyond my stories and ideas and ideologies and beliefs and right and wrongs, good, bad, true, false. He brought the me that could not fit into any of that. I often do that to Jen. I'll just stop dead and go, Button.
And as I said to you guys, we'd love it to be interactive and questions. So
I can't about.
I can't speak. That was just incredible. Thank you. I think that's the gift of this. It's literally just the beauty. When you have that connection with people, anything is possible.
Yeah, absolutely, Wayne.
And
I think we mentioned. Sorry, love.
No, and again hearing that what you both found was that connection to yourself, was finding who you really are. And what really got me in tears, like the whole, and this happens all the time with you too, is this is why I say it doesn't come more fresh than when you share, because it's not just saying, well, I have a lovely story to tell. It's just so alive. And the fact that we hear that we can change, our life can change. It doesn't matter what's going on in a second. It doesn't matter what situation you are. It doesn't matter what your circumstances are. You can be free.
Absolutely.
I love that, because in my own life, things haven't always been easy. Yet, through this understanding, I've literally seen that I can do anything I want. And over the last couple of weeks, everything for me has just fallen away. I've literally just seen myself, just every brick that I've got on my shoulders just falling. And it's just powerful.
It's cool.
Would you like us to ask people if they have some questions? It would be lovely to hear.
Please.
So either put your hand up, or we're going to make it so you can unmute yourself. Just give us a sec.
There you go.
So now you can unmute yourself, or you can put your hand up, or you can write it on the chat. So we'll give you a few seconds to
It's funny, I often hear people who've watched my videos or been at conferences, and then I speak, and then I can look back at them, and I've always spoken from what makes sense to me in the moment, and that changes, and my understanding of the principles has changed. And I think I've found more and more freedom to be honest with what I'm seeing. And I think I didn't realize I'd created the confines of what I thought it meant to share the principles, and what I thought it meant to be a facilitator. And I kind of closed my ears and got a bit tunnel visioned with it. And I guess in some ways I defend it. And it's been really nice, I'd say, over the last 5 years to have just allowed my voice to emerge. And it doesn't sound like it did when I started sharing this. It doesn't even sound like it did on the retreat. Like, I've seen that talk that Dave mentioned about right, wrong, good, bad, and all the boxes, and opening it up to, you realize we've been asking a question given a framework in which we've grown up in a framework in which we view the world. And from that place, we're going to get perplexed. But it's almost like opened me up to there isn't an answer in that way in the principles. There isn't the answer of, is it this or is it that? Like, it can be both. And I think there's a real freedom in that.
And neither at the same time.
And I think the other thing is, we often share that however much we've been around this and whatever we've seen, the freedom we speak about includes all feeling. And people are like, oh, but you seem so peaceful, or it's like, follow me around with a video camera for a week. You'll see me go in and out of different moods. You'll see me get totally caught up. And I think I want that honesty to be there, because otherwise, and I know I've done it, I kind of have this achievement model where I'd seen facilitators share. And when you get to have this kind of conversation and share with groups like you guys, you do get filled up with love. And it does seem so simple, but it's like, I don't live there all the time. But it's nice to know that the freedom is that we can experience and feel anything. We're built to take experience. And I think more and more I allow myself to fully engage in life. And I think before I almost used the principles as a way to step away, see it as thought, and I don't need to feel it. Whereas now I'm like, no, you can just feel it. This isn't mechanical. And I think that's the beauty of being introduced to yourself, your true self, because then that becomes your teacher. And it's not on our time scale of like, right, I want to have an insight and I want it to be around this. But the insights that come are just so relevant and perfect in our lives. And the times when I've got totally lost again I've got such a respect for that lostness. because then the compassion and love that comes from that for other people is huge. Because I think when you live in this, like, I know after coming across this, it felt like I had like months in this bubble, and nothing was personal, and I could just see people getting caught up, and then I started being like, God, how could you ever be shy? Oh my God, it's just thought. And then I lost my compassion, and then I got totally humbled and brought to my knees again with my own mind and how real the creations are. And I think it's more and more dawning on me that the freedom that Sid was pointing us towards wasn't a particular feeling state. It was the freedom of mind to think up anything, and it will. And that there's nothing in us that can be touched or broken by it. And I think that's the real gift, because then we don't have to fear our own mind or try and hold on to like the nice experiences and the openness. And then life is the teacher. And I think that's why often people say, because I think it was like 2.5 years ago we were with you in Florida, and what I said then would have been really relevant and really honest. And then if I listen to it now, I'll be like, wow, I can't believe I said that. Like, I don't know if I'm on board with that anymore. And it's just because the way I see the world changes, and my understanding kind of expands and collapses. And I think it's seeing more and more that the principles, I feel like it's a starting point or a beginning or an opening to something within us. And I kind of had started using it as like it was the end product, it was the end thing. See, the principles, they're true. And I like held on to it for dear life because of how much stability had come to my life through learning about this. But I kind of feel like life's more colourful now. It's more 3D, real, like, but it isn't all, lovely all the time. But all of it is like a gift, if that makes sense.
I personally have always found that idolization in the hearer, in the person who you could almost say brave, for want of a better word, is brave enough to let go of what they think they know and hear something new. Now that to me is a that's a brave human being, and that to me is the way that this world's going to change. If we want it to change into a different direction, that's the way it will. So you're right, S. You can say we had a lady on. I was talking about this just before to Wayne, and he was saying this lady sent us an email. She couldn't join us on our retreat we did just before that. Wayne and Carolina joined us on, and so we sent her out the retreat recordings. And she listened to the first one and she said, I had to apologize to her. I wrote her a big email. She said, I can't stand the language. I swear a lot. And she said, your conversation, what you're talking about. And I was talking about thoughts that used to occur to me an awful lot that I used to be so afraid of, like thoughts of killing people and looking for good places to bury people. And how would I dispose of the body? If I kill them, blah, blah, blah. And then thoughts that I'd had about children on their own and selling them on the black market and stuff like that. And she found that too much. And she said, I want my money back. And I said to her, I wrote her back an email. I said, yeah, fair enough.
We refunded it straight away.
We refunded the money straight away. I said, there's your money back. I said, but I'm asking you to please consider not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I said, if you don't mind, I explained to her why I share those stories. And then I said, if you don't mind, I'm going to send you the rest of the recordings. And it's up to you whether or not you choose to watch them or not. Anyway, the next day she said she went back to that same recording and she watched it again. And this time she heard the message. And she sent back an email saying, wow, this message is massive. And we spoke to her the day before yesterday, and she said, my life's totally changed. So you see, it's you can put something out, but it is down to the individual who hears. You know, and I did apologize for my language. I did say, look, I've been a tree surgeon for 17 years. I've worked with lads, idiots, who would just do the most horrific things to one another, and just lads. And yeah, I still swear a lot, but it's just me. And you know what? I'm all right with being me.
It was so good for us, wasn't it? Because we had then your mum's opinion, your dad's opinion, your sister's opinion. Then I was reflecting on it and thinking, well, actually, when we got together, I used to blink a lot. Like every time Dave would swear, I'd almost blink, and I'd kind of almost want to apologise for your language. But now I don't hear it in the same way. And actually, I do think it's just got a bit less anyway, because you're not in that environment anymore. But it was a really beautiful time for us to reflect on, do we try and now show up different? Like, do you need to now? And there's this huge discussion. And then the next day we opened day 2 with this fact that we'd had this email. And the cool thing was, we then had a young girl called Phoebe share on the retreat, who was someone we worked with last year. And she said, when Dave spoke about his dark thoughts, it did something for her, because she'd been in the psychiatric system since the age of 7. I think she'd been in institutions a couple of times. She tried to take her own life 3 times because she had such dark thought, really dark, tormenting thought. And she thought it meant something about her. And she said when she heard Dave tell those stories, but that's how my mind used to think, but that's not me.
And sometimes it still does.
Yeah, and you're really honest. Like I can still have those kind of thoughts.
I still have mad thoughts.
It did something for her. And I think that's why, like you say, yes, it depends who's listening. And some people it might not always speak to, and someone else might have not taken us up on that and said, yes, I will listen, but that would have been fine too. But it's always knowing it's the listener, like it's within us, because everyone on this call will hear something different. And I think that's the beauty. But we really learned something about authenticity and honesty, and that's all we can be. And like, I don't have to try and swear more to make people comfortable. It doesn't generally come to me that much, but I can just show up as me, and that will speak to some people, and you can show up as you. And I think that's the beautiful thing about it. It's not about having to pretend or try and be something else. It's in the moment what shows up, what's real for you, and connecting with people on that real level rather than trying to present something. And that again speaks to freedom.
I think that's why we're pretty honest, aren't we? Like, we're the first people to say, yeah, well, we have shitty thinking. We get upset sometimes. And it's like, I think that I said to this lady, the reason why I speak about that is because I used to be so terrified of it. I used to be afraid of my own mind. And when I'm afraid of my own mind, I'm afraid of life, because the two are one. And I think what I said to her, I said, look, people don't want to talk about it. People, I mean, I will perfectly honest with you, I will not divulge my thoughts that I think are the most socially unacceptable. So you can imagine what kind of level of thoughts they are. But they're thoughts. Now, this is, for me, this is where the freedom came in that moment. The moment when I'd listened to Sid and he'd said, do you know what, it's all thought. That hit me like a ton of bricks. I can't even explain the experience that kind of left me in for however long it was. But I came away from that knowing that there was nothing to be afraid of. And in that moment, it was the realization that, you know, thoughts aren't things. They're temporary manifestations of consciousness. And it didn't mean I was damaged. It didn't mean I was broken. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with me if I have thoughts that are not in line with social acceptance. And I think once people start to fear their mind less, fear their feelings, stop fighting their feelings, going to war with themselves, because this is what people do. They have a thought or a feeling, then they go to war with themselves, like motor neurons disease. Once people get rid of that psychological motor neurons disease by accepting, the power of acceptance, you know, something that's spoken about in all religious texts and teachings, and this power of acceptance, the moment we accept life for what it is, one, it's a divine mystery. You cannot know it. You cannot know it. Anybody who gets a glimpse of God would always come back and go, I can't explain that. They can't explain it. And it's like, what people call God is, well, that's not it either. It's like, you can't tangibly put what is life into words, because you cannot know it with the intellect. It's too big, it's too grand. And this is what we all are. We are all that. Every single one of us is that. Confusing ourselves for thoughts and feelings and experiences and memories and beliefs. And I think the more we start to identify with that space from which all that comes from, in Hinduism, Buddhism, they call it the dreamer. Reality is a dream state. It's accurate word to describe it, pretty much. We're all living in our own thought-created dream of life. We think we reserve dream state for a sleep state. No, it's the same means of creation when we're awake. The only thing is the senses are enlivened. It's the only difference. We still dream up whether something's good, bad, right, wrong, possible, impossible, blah. And we're all dreaming a different dream from the same space. And I think the more that we we identify ourselves with the dreamer and less with the dream, or we identify ourselves more as the thinker and less of the thoughts, the ego, the more we find the freedom to just be a human being. We don't need to escape being a human being. We don't need to spiritualize ourselves so much we stop being human. No, being human is it. That's it too. And we can accept being a human with our thoughts and our feelings and our desires and wants, and we can accept that. And the beautiful thing about that is, the moment we accept, as I once heard a Buddhist monk say, he said, the moment you accept, healing starts. And that's what this world needs now. Imagine a world, look at the world's face, and look what's in the media right now. It's like going on in America and around the world. It's like, it's because people don't accept. I remember being in South Africa, and our friend Lisa, after we came out of a soup kitchen, she said, 300 homeless people, majority black. She said, the problem's too big in South Africa, the problem's too big. I'm like, what do you mean? She said, look at all these people, it's just scratching the surface, the problem's too big, the divide's too big, problem's too big. And both Jen and I looked at each other and went, no, it's not. The problem, racial division in South Africa is not a big problem. It's a big problem if you look at it from the Western way of thinking about things, that we need to change the world in order for people to be all right. This materialist view of the world that we have, that the reality is a physical thing that we are subjected to. Reality is external. Reality, the mind has got nothing to do with reality. But when we realize, oh no, mind is reality, that's where reality is born. My reality, your reality, Jen's reality, Rusty's reality, the crow's reality, the ant's reality, the tree reality. You start to find yourself in a very powerful place, the dreamer. And we said to our friend Lise, look, if you think that you need to change South Africa's economy structure, employment structure, housing structure, yeah, that looks massively overwhelming, I get you. And then we said to her, but the only thing that South Africans really need to do is change their minds about one another. And that will solve all Africa's problems. The moment people start to think differently about a circumstance like this lady with our retreat, the moment her awareness shifted, her thoughts changed, the thought that she was living out of changed, a new possibility was born that she could hear and learn and grow. But from the other level of consciousness, which she was observing from at that other time, from the other perspective of mind, she couldn't. And we said to this lady, we said to our friend Lise, we just said, once South Africans change their minds about each other, South Africa will thrive. That's what we need to look at. That's what we need to look at. We need to look at unification and acceptance within people's minds, because that will change the world. It will change our world, and it will change the world.
I love what you're saying about we don't need to identify with our thinking. We are not our thinking. That we can just have a thought of whatever. We are free to think whatever we want, and then study or go, or you can do whatever you want with that. And I think one of the key ways of putting this message across is when we talk our truth, as you're saying, is people may see me and may see us, and because Wayne's got cerebral palsy, we always talk about how people may perceive the struggle on Wayne's life, and then I look very put together and happy and social and outcoming. Now, I've struggled with depression and suicidal thinking my whole life, and I live my life very afraid until I saw that I wasn't broken. I wasn't all these clinical things I have heard I was, or I had through many years of psychological therapy, and then over a year ago, my dad committed suicide, and then I thought, oh geez, like now this is real, like this is in my genes. I could actually now act potentially on one of my thoughts of when I think I don't want to live anymore and I want to get out of it. And several times during the past year, I had my doctor and other people trying to convince me on taking antidepressants. And I'm not saying people shouldn't take them. My own personal decision was that when I've been before on antidepressants, I went into this neutral state of feeling where I didn't feel sort of like very happy or very upset. And what I've learned thanks to this is that I can go any place on the spectrum. I can have all the colors in the palette. The good thing is I can feel super low. I can allow myself to feel incredible pain, but at the same time have something in me going, it's just suicidal thinking. It's just, and when I can't really say it, I can call Wayne, or I can just call Susie who's here, or I can just, just go like, I know it's just thinking, but I can't say it. So I need just hold me just give me a space to just be in this space. And then I know, something in me knows that hopefully I will come. I know that I'm okay. I know that I'm okay. And I'm allowed. And this is powerful to put across, that we didn't buy a ticket to Disneyland feeling. We didn't buy a ticket where our lives are always gonna be in, nirvana. We are in a human experience where our feelings are gonna go like this. And the more we understand our experience, the more like this they are, because the more free we are to go, up and down and feel whatever we want. And so I really want to thank you. And I don't know how we're doing with time or if there are any other questions, but
we've got about
an hour and 23.
Is it an hour?
Yeah, we get 2 hours.
How long
And we
have
got
we
here
been?
at 6:15.
Oh, saying our only time constraint is an £85 fine at Keel Services if you're here more than 2 hours. So you're fine. We're cool. Honestly, we're cool.
I think for me, what you just said was incredible, because it's like what I've seen and what you've just said is the acceptance. I can let myself go in, I don't have to be in one state. If I'm having a rough day or I'm feeling rough or I've got a bad back, I can just sit in that. I can let myself off from feeling like, oh, well, you can't feel like that because you know the principles. It's the acceptance. It's the acceptance of being who you are in that moment. And we were having a conversation last night and you said to me, you can be, or what I heard is you can be feeling rough 1 minute and then the next minute you can be feeling completely different, because your mind and what you're thinking is somewhere completely different. It's accepting that you're feeling the way you're feeling and what you're thinking, and just sitting in that. I've always struggled with just sitting in that, because it's that not nice feeling. And when you sit in that not nice feeling, it's horrible. But then if you try to get out of it, you're going to be stuck there longer.
It's a really, we're saying to a girl just before we came on this call, because we're on another call, and we just said, look, if you're constantly going to look at your hand, you're not going to see anything else. Stop looking at your hand.
Yeah.
And but what you're speaking to there, Wayne, my mother's brother died 4 years ago now, 3 years ago? 3 years ago. She's very close to her brother. He died of emphysema and liver failure. He'd never smoked in his life or drunk alcohol. Some rare genetic condition that he had. And I remember, I think, were we up in Scotland?
I think so. It was almost a year after it happened.
Yeah, it was a good few months after it happened. And Dad came running through and he was like, you've got to go and help your mum. You've got to go and help your mum. Why? What's wrong? She's really upset about your Uncle Malcolm. You've got to go and help her. And we were just like, no. Let her feel it, Dad. She's all right. She's just feeling. She's all right. And he just went, okay. And then walked off. And we just let Mum fully experience the grief and loss of her brother in that moment. 10 minutes later, she came out and went, what are we going to do today? Now, I know that we could have gone and sat down and been like, and I'm not saying don't do this. This isn't a prescription. It's just an observation. We could have been like, Mum, come on, tell us all about it. And we could have been there 2 or 3 hours staring at the hand. But the nice thing about the mind is it does change. There isn't anybody on earth who hasn't experienced that. We might not be aware of that fact. Such a simple fact that the mind just changes all on its own. And as it changes, so the experience of life takes on a whole new expression, and we experience that in that moment. But it's all born from the same place. And I think the more we kind of see that, it's like people come to us and talk about the suicide thought, and it's like, well, what's the difference ultimately? What's the difference between the suicide thought and do I want tea or coffee? It's the same force. It's the same force taking form. it's a thought. It's nothing more than a thought. It's just, it appears different to us, and we take some thoughts seriously and some thoughts we don't. And so I think what this tends to do is this tends to neutralize thinking into thought, the power of thought. All thinking comes from the power of thought. And for so long we've studied thinking, we've studied creation, you know, we study thoughts and feelings, and we've studied thoughts and feelings and reality because that's what Western science can study. It studies creation. So we spend our life looking at creation and trying to figure it all out into true and false. Yes, no, good, bad, right, wrong, possible, impossible. And so when we look at creation, it creates limitations within with what appears like limitations. But we are not, you know, and so we study the creations of mind, thoughts, but we've studied creation. Like we've studied our thoughts and feelings, but we've studied creation for so long, and we think it's in studying creation that we're going to find the answer that we're looking for. In studying creation, in studying the thoughts, in studying the feelings, why am I thinking this? Why am I feeling this? We're so mesmerized by that creation that we never stop to ponder the creator.
I don't know if I share a quick story.
Yeah.
I just wanted to share, we met a man in South Africa called Godel, and he spoke on our retreat. And I think I thought I knew that the principles had the power to change the world. But when he woke up to this, he really saw that there's something that can happen within mind, within consciousness, that can change the world. And he saw it so simply. And we asked him, do you really think it's that simple? And he just said, I really don't think it's that complicated. And then since he... Oh,
I watched that happen.
You did it?
I turned the...
You always do it when I'm talking.
Sorry, look.
I'm trying to think what I was talking about.
You talk about Godel. Is it really that simple to change?
No, it wasn't that. 2 seconds. So then since then, he's been speaking to a Catholic priest that's one of his really good friends from when he lived in the monasteries out in the Congo. And he was like, right, I want this to come to the Congo. I've got 200 people, tribal, religious and armed group leaders. They're available. When can you come? And it was like, whoa, 200 people. There's no way we can take that on. And Godel was just like, we start with 20. We get enough money to fund a project with 20. And the other thing about him is that he has been the victim of xenophobic attacks. He nearly lost his life. He has been, he's disabled in a wheelchair. And he's just said he has been treated badly by so many people. But this man is just full of love. And he knows that love is what changes.
No need to complain.
And he inspired me and kind of showed me the truth in what Sid was trying to point us towards to such a depth that we speak to him regularly because he's just so full of course it's possible. It's not that complicated. And I know how I can get caught up thinking the logistics and, you know, we are the ones trying to find the funding and all those things. But it's like, he has this faith in God, but it's not a God out there far away, is how he described it. He said he realized that somehow he was that God. He was that creator. And now he's just like in this creative space. And it's so inspiring because he's like,
dreaming big,
I see my own limitations of what I thought would be possible. And he's just like, no, we're going to do this now. We're going to make this happen. And I'm like, cool. And kind of going along for the ride. But it's been, and I think that's the thing to always, I remember is, it's just, we're all teachers and we're all students. And that we haven't got something that other people haven't got. And like so many moments in our conversations with Godel, we're just sat there like, whoa, this man. And now he's sharing with everyone that comes into his centre, his charity. And he's opened his arms to South Africans who are struggling. Like his heart is just so expansive.
It's the same ones that were petrol bombing him, isn't it? The same group of people that were petrol bombing him.
And I think that's I don't know, you see how when we take it back to the simplicity, anything's possible. Even when it seems so huge. And like our friend said after the soup kitchen, it seems too big. But Goodell's like, well, no, we start here. We have this conversation. We have this group. And to him, it is that simple. So I just wanted to share that.
That's cool. Any more questions? And I think the beauty that man, I mean, I can't believe I only remembered this. How long ago was it? 18 months ago?
I think only not even a year, I don't think.
I just remember it. I remembered it. Just for some reason, it came out of the ether into my mind, and I remembered it. And I remember for like going there it was. There it was. There was the capacity of love within the scariest man you'd ever met beside yourself. And the judgment that I carried around, the judgment that I had for people. And I think that was one of the moments where regardless of the principles, becoming aware of the principles are just a bunch of words. They're just a guide. They're not a thing. They don't even exist ultimately. They're just words. They only exist as a concept. But what they're trying to point to is fundamental. And that fundamentalness exists whether people are aware of the principles or not. It's like, it's like there it was. I got to learn a lesson about love there and then, and my capacity to be judgmental and the ego that I carried around about people. I learned an awful lot.
It's like you remember the prison guard saying to you, "You don't belong here" or something, and he showed you such kindness.
Yeah, he said, "Do you think you're a criminal?" He just pulled me to one side. They call them screws. The screw pulled me to one side. He was hard as fucking nails as well. You did not cross this man. He pulled me to one side and he said, "Why are you in here?" So I told him, violence, somebody attacked my sister. He said, "Do you think you're a criminal?" I said, "I suppose so." He just looked at me and went, "I don't." And I remember it was just one of those moments where it was all I needed to hear. Yeah. I just needed that love in that time of struggle. I just needed that love. And that love came in those two simple words, "I don't." That was all it took. And I felt lighter and I felt more connected and like I could deal with being in prison. And it was one of those moments, people are forever trying to escape the hard times. Of course we are. They feel like shit. Would we, when we look back at our life, would we take those hard times away? Ask ourselves that question. Or do we now recognize a value in it? Somewhere along the line, at some level, is there a value to the suffering? It's like, I feel like the majority of my growth that I've ever gone through has been through when I've really hit the fucking bottom. When I've been stood at Hell's Gates and I've gone, I can't take any more than this. Only for something else to happen and go, right, I can't take any more than that then. It's like, it feels like when we're tested, the thing that we're trying to escape from is the gift that's waking us up. It's waking us up. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up, Rust.
Rusty's like, what?
Wake up. And I'm not saying that's a truth. Many people wake up who don't struggle. It's not that people have to go through struggle. It's not now I need to make my life a fucking misery to wake up. No, it's got nothing. It's just, I am eternally thankful for the things now, and that my greatest gifts in my life were the hard times. It is waking us up to this conversation is a conversation about the missing part of the puzzle, the spiritual essence of life. Yeah. I remember saying to Jen, I wasn't remotely interested in the spiritual until it hit me like a ton of bricks, and I didn't choose it. I didn't know to go there. It wasn't something I chose. It just happened. And I had two experiences within very quick succession, within a month or so of each other. And the first one showed me something that I cannot to this day put into words, but it showed me it's all magic. It's all magic. That's the only word I can really describe it as. It's magic. It's magic. All of it. Every single, the most terrible thing a human being has done to another human being, it's that same magic. And the next one was insight into the nature of mind. Now, I put the two together at that time until it occurred the second time, and then it all just fell into place, and my life suddenly went very simple. Wow, it's so simple. It's all perfect. Everything is total perfection, continuously, always. Not from our perspective as human beings and social conditioning of right, wrong, good, bad, true, false, possible, impossible, but divinely perfect. And everything is this divine essence. And I remember saying to Jen, what was it? What was there when you first woke up? Because I asked her that question because when I came across this, I started listening to other people, and I assumed that they'd found something that I hadn't. I started to listen to other people's stories, and I put other people, like, I assumed that they knew more than me because they'd been around it longer than me. And before long, I was taking on other people. Oh, that's the way you teach this. Also, you don't talk about this. You don't talk about that. And I hadn't. I just adopted ego. I created more ego. The thing that was getting in the way in the first place, ideology, beliefs. And I remember we were on a Via Ferrata in Switzerland, and my life at this point was quite flat. I'd lost that magical awareness. I'd lost it. It's an everyday magical awareness. It's not like I want to be really clear about this. It's just life. But I'd lost the intrigue and magic and acknowledgement of the mystery. And it was on a Via Ferrata where this insight came to me, and it just said, go back to the moment you woke up. What was there? And within my mind, I went back to the experience that I experienced when I woke up. And I call it an awakening, because for me it was like I had literally been born again. I felt completely reborn. I can understand why people go to religion at this point, because I nearly became a Buddhist monk. I didn't know what the hell to do with myself. I considered becoming a Buddhist monk, and but when I went back into that space within my mind, and the only way I can describe it as I went back into that space is I remembered it. When I went back in my memories and relived that experience, I remember the magic and mystery of the divine knowing of everything and nothing and love. Like love beyond love. And that was the thing that set me free. It was love. That divine love was the thing that killed that ego that I'd carried around since school times. It killed it dead. Now, I thought my problem was the problems that I was encountering in my life. No, they weren't my problems. My problem was I was lost, full stop. I get the saying, I was lost, now I'm found. I get that. But I think when we're found, it's just a new beginning. You cannot get to know this stuff. Any idea that you think that anybody thinks they know about mind, consciousness, and thought, forget it. It's not it. That's ego. It's just pure ego. But I remember saying to Jen, what was there when you first woke up? And you said, I came back with the knowing that there is nothing to fear in this lifetime. And I said, me too. There is nothing to fear in this lifetime. That changed my life. Because we think that we are finite, individual human beings of physical appearance. We are that, but also we're not. We are that physical finite. We are that true, but it's also false. Because we're also infinite spiritual force. Dream state. Experiencer. We're that too. So this is where the true false rationale, is it non-duality? Is it non-duality is true? Three principles is false. Three principles is false. True and all that stuff. No. It doesn't work like that. No, it doesn't work like that. What we're talking about is everything and nothing at the same time. It's true and false at the same time, depending on the observation angle that we're adopting. But the truest of truths lies in the fact of what lies behind it all. And that is the same for everybody. And I think as we start to wake up to that spiritual nature of life, people can like it or lump it, it's there. Ask yourself the question, what are we? Where did we come from? How is this magnificent experience and beingness here? Is it a fluke? Is it evolution? What is evolution? How can evolution take place without knowledge? What is knowledge? Where does it all come from? You will have to come back to I don't know. And I don't know is the best place anybody can ever find themselves, because it's an open mind. And I forget which French philosopher said, the least blasphemous word for God is openness.
Wow.
Steaming up. We're in a car park with steamy windows. I'm just going to check the car next to me. One sec. No, it's empty, don't worry.
Oh my. Oh, you are incredible. I love you so much.
Oh, we love you too.
It's been an amazing time together. Thank you so much for being so generous.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for thinking of us.
How could we not after this? It's you, as I said at the start, you both are incredible.
Thanks, Wayne, and so are you lot.
How would people get in contact with you if they wanted to get in contact with you and connect with you?
So we've got freedomthinking.co.uk or info@freedomthinking.co.uk is our email address.
And we've got a Facebook page. I'm not on Facebook, but our Facebook page is Freedom Thinking.
I've got a friend of mine that's actually deleted the app off his phone, and whenever he wants to go on Facebook, he has to go through online.
Well, that's how I do.
That's how Jenny does it.
Yeah. And he said to me the other day, he was like, you know what, it's so refreshing and so free not to have that anymore.
Yeah. Though I would like to thank Facebook a lot, because
absolutely, yeah.
Let people know that we're doing this. So did somebody arrive now, or is it gone?
I think it's gone.
It's gone. Somebody got the time wrong as well. It was on Dave's time.
It was 8 o'clock.
Somebody was on Dave's time as well. So before you go, thank you so much, and hope we can have it again. We can have something else again. And so one of the things we wanted for our series is really to have people that have been impactful for us, and also we like different voices. We like people that will talk about their experience from wherever they want to talk about it. So this may not be like the usual style that you may find in other places, or it may be the usual style that you find in other places. So next week we're actually having Janet Rhynie. So you're invited. I know you have your group on this time on Thursdays, but yeah, she's coming. Janet was here in the call, and she's coming next Thursday at 6 p.m. UK time, and she's gonna talk about identity is the key to connection. That's what she chose as the topic she wants to talk about. And Janet, as you can see from the reaction from Dave and Jen, it's just like, oh my God, she's funny, she's adorable, she just calls a spade, like, you know, there's no, she's super spontaneous, work with tons of people, and we're also in for a treat. Also happening this weekend from Sunday, Monday and Tuesday, the annual conference in London of the principals is now online. It's completely online, so you can go to, because it's changed, we're going to have a look,
3puk.org.
Thank you very much to that one.
Your Alexa's got a funny voice.
Yeah, we put presenters' voices like when we say this, so it seems to go better than normal one. We can be whatever we want because it's just all made up. So we'll let children play around with this. So yeah, so that's happening. It's a very reduced price here in the UK. It's £100 for 3 days, and it will be sort of a similar price, I guess, for any other countries. And there's tons of speakers, again, talking about different things and mental health, and lots of variety. So please, we're going to put it so people can find it, and we're also going to put the details so you can find Dave and Jen and all the amazing stuff they do. And we're going to start saving to go to Congo, I think.
I've heard it's a beautiful holiday destination.
Yeah. As soon as the planes are flying again.
We'll be in Burundi, but you go to Congo. Tell us what it's like.
We're going to Congo.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yes, thank
Lots of
you.
love, everybody.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, both of you.